Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Season 6, Episode 25, To Where I'm Back Again, Part 1. For those of you not in the loop, probably those of you watching on YouTube or the VODs, I am still recovering from being severely and violently ill, so if I feel a little bit off, it's because I am. Now, let's talk about the episode. It's just... You know, I'm all for helping Derpy out. She's a nice pony, and but I don't think I'd make her a delivery, like a male delivery pony. Is that just me? I don't know. I don't know. All right. So the episode starts. Are they in date? So Starlight gets a letter from our town, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's horrible." And Spike and Twilight, "Oh my God, what is it? Are they in danger? Are they upset with you?" "No, it's worse. They've invited me to a festival." Hashtag relatable. I hope S.A. Ross doesn't dislike me too much today, because I'm going to be relating to Starlight a lot. Just hear me out for a second. We'll build up to this point. But I do want to stop and say that for, I think the 4th time now, the end of Season 5 needed to just be headcanoned out of existence. The montage, specifically. The montage where Starlight goes around and gets forgiven by everything and everything's good. The more I see of this show and the more I analyze it, the more that one scene doesn't fit. If you just slice that out and eject it, Starlight's arc is smooth and well-designed from here into Season 7 as well. And yet, if you have it there, it's just like it goes, it just has this weird interruption, and then goes back to, it's basically, if I could use a parallel, it's like the Star Trek movies. Because you have Star Trek 1, which, while it's not directly connected to, does lead into Star Trek 2, which directly leads into Star Trek 3, which directly leads into Star Trek 4, and then there's Star Trek 5, and then Star Trek 4 leads directly into Star Trek 6. It's almost the exact same problem, although nowhere near as severe, obviously, because it was one montage instead of an entire movie of just whatever. But it is the same problem, right? It's the same... It totally disrupts and damages the flow of the thing. Oh no, you should totally watch 5. 5 is not as bad as Nemesis. Nemesis is disgusting. 5 is hysterical. 5 is something that my sister and I, when she was going through the movies... Oh, wow, just giving that speech right now took more out of me than I thought it would. I'm really low on energy right now. When my sister and I were watching through the Star Trek movies, she and I made a lot of fun of Star Trek 5. Wow. Okay. So yeah, that montage needed to just be gone, right? But we once again see, if forgive me for repeating myself, we once again see how Starlight's character arc of not necessarily wanting to be forgiven because she thinks she shouldn't be is continuing. You know, the arc that started in 6, basically. The guilt, the shame that Starlight is carrying with her is still on display. It's still evident. And there's still a lot of emotional baggage, as there should be around that kind of thing. She should still have to be dealing with this. You know, this should not be a, yeah, I'm good kind of a deal. Now, I talk up the MLP Streaminations a lot, and that's mostly because I have had so much more to talk about in this series than I have any other show I've covered, right? It's just, we've covered such a range of so many down-to-earth human concepts. A lot of psychology. We've discussed psychology almost constantly in the MLP Streaminations. Stuff like the next scene is part of why. Sorry for the pauses. Like I said, I'm really low on energy tanks right now. She has a dream about showing up to an event she was invited to, and yet they all act weird at the fact that she's there. Oh, we didn't think you'd actually show up. Starlight, what are you doing here? This sequence is perfect. Perfectly written, perfectly voice acted. What? You didn't actually think we wanted you to come? That is such an incredibly relatable concept right there. I know so many people who have had that exact same sensation, who have told me to my face, oh, they just wrote the invite to be polite. Or they're just saying that to be nice. They don't actually mean that. They don't actually think I'm worth that. They haven't actually forgiven me. They're just trying to be decent about it. Right? I bet most of you in chat and or who are watching this on the VOD absolutely understand and relate to that mindset, that concept. And that is all on display here. The way she's reacting to this, the way that she's stressing out about this. And then, of course, what's one of the worst things that can happen when you have that fear is you show up and they're like, what are you doing here? You know, it's just it's almost casual. There's not even like severe disdain because you're not worth enough to be hated. It's more like just, why are you here? We also have, so I'm going to be talking about storytelling construction because this episode is well written and badly written simultaneously. Now, this episode was written by two people. I don't know if that's related, but those are two distinct facts that may or may not be related to each other. This episode was written by Josh Haber, who has an incredible track record of episodes, and Michael Vogel, who does not. Again, may be related, I don't know. But I'm pointing that out because some of the construction of some of the scenes and the dialogue and just is brilliant. And then there's the other ones we'll get to in a second. Hi, Syracuse. So Luna shows up. Bit of a Chekhov's gun, but also smart storytelling. Because A, it's a reminder of the fact that Luna had to deal with her own guilt. Remember, we had an entire episode about that. And B, it's designed to be kind of a built-in Chekhov's gun so that you know for when she shows up later. And of course, C, I don't deserve to be forgiven is something that Luna understands perfectly well. They don't, and again, this is good construction because she doesn't even directly call it out. She doesn't even mention the Tantalus or whatever she called it. It's just kind of hinted at, and she mentions that some ponies helped her through that, and yeah, that's awesome. So that definitely gets a continuity counter. That's pretty much the definition of a continuity counter right there. Just knock that up there. So for once in fiction, Starlight decides to be honest about things, not, try to keep it quiet or keep it to herself, and immediately goes to other people and say, hey, hi, this is what's bugging me, and this is why it's bugging me. Now, I know, Saros. I forget how long it's been there, but I think it's since they repaired it. I'm not actually sure about that. This is another one of those relatable things. I'm going to fail at explaining this because I'm having trouble sitting upright right now. This is taking a lot of energy. But how many of you have ever had something that bothers you and you felt silly for admitting it? Or for explaining it to someone else? Like there's this sort of, I don't want to say shame, but it's just kind of a little embarrassment, right? Like you don't want to, I mean, I know it's stupid to comment on it. It's just, every time I bother to go out of my way to do these little things to show you how much I care about you, and you never really reciprocate, you never do that back, and I know why you do it, but God, it really bothers me because it makes me question whether or not you care about me in return. Totally did not directly actually have that happen with one of my girlfriends once. This is a long time ago, obviously. Yeah, that vibe. You see what I mean by how much I relate, or rather, that Starlight is a relatable character. Little, very, very down-to-earth human uncertainty and emotional instability stuff is why Starlight is just brilliant and stuff like this. I love it. So she opens up about it, and they're supportive. That's important, but of course they are. Ignoring the fact, so let's be clear, they're not friends. I'm just going to lay that down. Starlight and the main six are not friends. But they're nice enough people, and they're supportive enough after 6 seasons of stuff to be at the point where even if she was a total stranger, they would be supportive of her. And they're kind of starting to build up to friendship. As I've said, it's a gradient, right? It's an arc. It happens over time. So that supportiveness makes perfect sense. It's awesome. And I'm not sure I disagree with that, SRS, but I'll talk about that in just a second, because actually I'm going to bring that up later. Speaking of which, Twilight says, hey, you should take a friend with you who's totally got you and is going to be everything. And I love how while she's doing this, Spike is just sitting there like... Because he knows. He knows she's not going to take her. So, you know, Trixie enters the episode. Trixie is awesome, as usual. I think there's only one episode I don't like Trixie in, and that's from memory, so we'll see when we get there. So Trixie's there. You know, Trixie naturally cannot, just can't stop herself from rubbing it into Twilight, yet, oh, her best friend. Staying true to form. But it is worth noting that for all of her foibles, Trixie does actually demonstrably care and does actually have Starlight's back. She does. She proves this several times in this episode, and I want you to remember that because again, there's a future episode about bottling up where I think Trixie is out of character, where it pisses me off. But we'll get there when we get there. For here, though, she's legit. So you know, they go to the town. And is it really next week? Are we that close? Wow. So next week I will be complaining about Trixie being out of character, but let's move on. So they get to our town. And naturally, the first thing that happens is they immediately try to foist all of their troubles onto Starlight and say, Starlight, help us out with all this stuff. This is an oddity, because what we have here is someone who is demonstrably not a good leader, who is being tasked with being an organizer. Now, I said I'd bring this up again back in the episode where she mind-controlled the main 6. And that boils down to the idea that... Yeah, it's basically a different skill set thing. What's happening here, Starlight, I stand by it, Starlight is not a good leader. She's not. But she does have organizational tasks. She can't manage, but she can organize. And the difference is someone who is only good at organizing is good at organizing robots. To explain that just a little bit, let's pull in Star Trek, okay? One of the things I talked about during Chains of Command, Part 1 and 2, was that Captain Jellicoe, his command style was such that he was a terrible leader, but a very good organizer. I don't think I used the term organizer then, but it's true. When people do exactly what he tells them to do it and how to do it, stuff gets done. As long as everyone under him is a drone who does exactly what he tells them, it works out. I actually pointed this out in the Ruminations because not only does he shut down attempts at feedback or any kind of push-up from his command staff, but the one person that consistently tracks with him is Data. Now, that's not necessarily bad. It's just a different command style. That is a valid command style. Do what I tell you, go. And there is nothing necessarily wrong with that so long as the singular point of failure, which is Jellicoe himself, does not fail, right? This is, and I mean this sincerely, what Jellicoe does is single point of failure. What Picard does is multiple points of failure. If someone in the command structure fails, other people pick up the slack. That's the difference. But the problem with having multiple points like this is in a crisis situation, generally speaking, you don't want to get buy-in. You want everyone to follow the singular, immediate, has the full perspective, knows what's going on, has the 1,000-mile view, and can actually give the correct orders, regardless of what you know in the moment. Now, and I could go off on this topic for a while, because the catch there is that you need to have earned the trust necessary in order to actually be able to accomplish that so that they know they're doing the right thing, and blah, 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 blah. Getting back to My Little Pony here for a second. A good example of a leader who can't organize? In MLP? I'll have to think about that. Of course, you're asking me to flex my brain right now, of all times. A good leader who's a bad organizer. So the problem is, most of the time in fiction, when we have good leaders, they are also good organizers. Like Kirk, you'll see this as we go through TOS quite a bit. Kirk is an excellent organizer. There's a scene in an episode of TOS where he is asked to assign people to a squad, and he picks out someone who just joined his crew a week ago, along with 2 other random people, just by name, like that. Kirk is a very good organizer, and he's a good leader. And you see my point. You know, they tend to be both, usually, in fiction. It's rare we see one or the other. Actually, I've got an example for you. Dukat is a surprisingly good leader and a terrible organizer. And Weiyun is an awful leader and a fantastic organizer. Most of the Weiyuns. I think that's a decent way to do that. Because Dukat has the charisma in spades. That's his shtick, basically. And he knows how to garner, he knows how to lead, he knows how to grab people's attention. He has no idea what he's doing. Yeah, Dukat's dump stat is wisdom and int, but his charisma's through the roof. Whereas Weiyun wouldn't know how to lead a tea kettle, because of course not. He's used to leading Jem'Hadar. He doesn't have to. And we get, and I'm going to finally tie this in. I'm just saying Weiyun is Starlight. Hear me out. You know, that's actually a good example, Loner. That is a good example. James Raynor from StarCraft is a fantastic leader, but Matt Horner is the organizer. Matt Horner's the one who keeps that ship running. So there's a more heroic example of the same thing. Point being, Starlight, I said we tie it back in. Starlight is a terrible leader. We've already established this. But she doesn't need to be when the people are flat out coming to her saying, please tell us what to do. And that's kind of what they had going on back when she was still, you know, running her cult. She didn't need to earn their sympathy or trust. She didn't need to lead them at all. All she had to do was tell them what to do. She was running a group of Jem'Hadar. Now, they weren't complete drones. Even Jem'Hadar think for themselves. But you get the idea. So it makes perfect, absolute sense that they would try to refoist all of those organizational tasks right back onto her. A, they remember she was good at that. B, well, this is when this gets a little bit dark. They're probably not used to self-managing. They're probably still kind of figuring out how to do things for themselves. It's only been like a year, right? I did notice that, S.A. Ross. So they are, yeah, I mean, there's no nice way to say this. This was a cult who was basically programmed to all do the same thing and not think for themselves. Of course, they're going to try to foist leadership onto her. And that's kind of why this is so messed up, and it makes so much sense that she is freaking out here. I was actually going to bring that up too in Pearl Starter Shorter, because I'll cover your point first. A, this is probably them trying to reach out an olive branch. Hey, it's okay, we're cool. Help us out with this stuff. You were good at this stuff, right? And naturally, she just freaks out. And B, falling into old patterns, which of course is not what Starlight actually wants, which would freak her out. It could be either, and it could be both, and there could be more reasons here too. But either way, yeah, Starlight completely flips out over this, as she should. Credit to Trixie. Trixie's got her back like that. Immediately is like, ah, yes, this has been an amazing show. Everything's cool. A smoke leads her away. Love it. Right there with her. Bam. Remember that for next week. Yeah, Trixie's a bro. Trixie's a bro. It's legitimately sweet. I did some looking into it. So let's go ahead and discuss what is probably the stupidest aspect of these two episodes. Let's just get this out of the way. Off camera, the changelings wander around and manage to successfully capture 4 princesses and 5 other ponies, a dragon, a baby, and I think that's everything. Now, this is stupid, and I'm not going to excuse that. It is done because plot, and that is why it is done. Now, I don't mind it because of the fact that we got something good out of it. This is a clear-cut example of cloud effect. A stupid premise that I'm willing to let go because we got something good out of it. It is worth noting, I actually looked this up. Apparently, the canon explanation for them getting the 6, just the 6, I have no idea about the rest, is they grabbed Pinkie Pie first, and then Pinkie Pie threw a party and invited the rest, and that's when they grabbed and replaced them. Now, having said that, I do have to point out that this is something that doesn't bother me as much as some other examples of the cloud effect. Because I've played Zelda Wind Waker, is the simplest way to put this. Now, in the off chance you are not intimately familiar with that game or haven't seen my lore run on it, what happened in Zelda Wind Waker... This is a huge spoiler, by the way, so spoilers for Zelda Wind Waker. Okay, spoilers. In the backstory to Zelda Wind Waker, Ganondorf returned, shocking, I know, and was smart. He paid attention, thought it out, and didn't come out... He basically didn't publicly be like, oh, I am Ganondorf and I'm back. Instead, he stayed quiet and in the background until he had identified each of his targets, and then did a lightning strike to kill the people who powered up the sword to defeat him, and took the castle and just... Basically, it was a very carefully planned out alpha strike, done from secrecy, with forethought and planning and yada yada yada. That is the kind of thing that absolutely does work in real life. This is kind of related in a way to the masquerade concept. In short, if you... Yeah, basically, the way that they took out Thanos in Endgame, in the beginning of Endgame, is exactly this kind of a thing. Knew exactly where he was, had already scouted, knew exactly what they were doing, very coordinated, very, very precise, bam, 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 done. Now, I bring that up because the value of a properly coordinated and planned alpha strike is insane. Entire wars can be won and lost based on this kind of a concept. And while I say it is kind of stupid, at the same time, I do have to admit, if the changelings planned this out properly, scouted this out properly, and effectively all of them struck as one, this could actually happen. That's why I say it only bothers me a little. Because... Well, I don't have anything else to add to that sentence. Because of everything I just talked about, right? Now, that being said, the episode then goes right back into very good writing. Now, I was going to bring up the Pinkie bouncing thing. I actually mentioned it right here. But the other thing that's really cool about Pinkie is the fact that she is... How do I explain this? I'm trying to... Sorry, it's really hard to stay coherent right now. There's a concept of mimetic mutation when it comes to characters in fiction, and what tends to happen is people tend to exemplify the exaggerations and the characterizations rather than the characterizations of a specific character over time, right? Any of the nuance and subtlety of the performance tends to drift away in collective consciousness. This is a really common thing. I've got another Star Trek, because I love to parallel this to Star Trek. Kirk. Now, Kirk, everyone says, I'm James T. Kirk, and I'm an overactor. And, okay, yeah, sure. That's not Kirk. Anybody who's actually seen TOS or the movies will tell you that is a Flandersization. That is a exaggeration based on a few specific tics that he does a couple of times. But that's what kind of drifts into the collective consciousness, and that's what people think of when they think of Kirk, at least as long as they're not actually thinking of the character, right? The reason I bring that up is that's exactly what she does, Andrea Libman, I think, when she is voicing Pinkie Pie here. It's brilliant. She does a Flandersization of Pinkie Pie. Now, I point that out because that's the first of, I believe, 4 examples of out-of-characterness, and all 4 are distinct and different. So the first we have is Flanderization, being out of character in the sense of being a caricature rather than a character. First point. Then we go see Rarity and Applejack. Now, this is the second example of out of character. Both of them are far more in character in the way they act and talk. There's speech patterns and the way that they move. Their body language is all similar. But instead, what they do is they react unusually. Oh my god, and they just mock her, right? They make fun of the fact that she ran away, despite how supportive both were earlier and the fact that this is not how they would react. So we have a out-of-character reaction. The third out-of-character we have is a complete tonal shift. This is easiest exemplified by Rainbow Dash. Rainbow Dash. Because Rainbow shows up and is just rude, to the point of actually being, just, what the heck is wrong with you? Spike also is exactly the same type of thing. Just completely shut down, complete attitude change, right? And that leads to 4. This is my personal favorite, and the reason I say this is well written. I mean, ignoring the fact that they're giving us different flavors of out of character, Twilight's is the best, because it's someone who probably actually did her freaking homework with regards to the character she's replacing, or he's replacing, or whatever. But the relevant point is that she is still out of character in a more nuanced thing. She gives advice that she wouldn't. Like, she says something that would not be something that she would say. And other than that, she's fully in character. She's got the tone, she's willing to talk, she doesn't react weird, she's not completely out of playing. She's just, oh wow, yeah, well, you should never go back there. Trust me, I'm the Prince of a Friendship. I know about this sort of thing. Other than what she says to do, give up entirely, everything she's doing there is in character. That's also good horror uses that 4th type of out of character to good effect, by the way. Because in every other way, they're completely legit. It's just... that's odd, Hang on, I need to see what Nero's has just donated for. Ah, gotcha. You got it, Nero's has. You got it. Give me here. There we go. Okay. Assuming it ever goes through. So, good writing, good writing, good writing, good writing, good writing. This then leads to... hang on, where's my notes? Right. So, this then leads to some bad writing, but also some good writing. Like I said, this is a really yo-yo episode. Starlight has her second dream sequence. This is when we pay off the gun from earlier. But you'll notice that her dream, regardless of Luna, regardless of everything else, is all about how she must do everything Twilight tells her to. And she has to because she's her teacher. Now, it's a really minor point, and it's almost immediately brushed aside in favor of Luna's scene, which I'll get to in just a second. But I bring that up because if you're paying attention, one of the common threads that Starlight has is how much she wants to live up to Twilight's expectations of her, or perhaps her perceived expectations of her. Starlight desperately wants to please Twilight. And that makes so much sense for all the reasons, but the biggest one, of course, being the fact that Twilight is the one who's personally reached out to Starlight and pulled her off the ledge, right? She needs to prove that she's worth that outstretched hand. And yeah, this has shown up more than once, I believe, prior to now. And this is just it showing up, again, very briefly. I need to earn this. And so there's that constant terror of her teacher and her mentor and wanting to make sure that she is pleasing her, right? Nice little character moment. Almost immediately gotten rid of. Because what happens next is bad writing. This is straight up Hollywood right here. I'm sorry, one moment. My mother just messaged me. I am able to sit up, comma, and I've been able to keep liquids down since this morning, period. Worrying about me, obviously. This is straight up Hollywood. No, really. Listen, I'm on the verge of death. But while I'm here, dying, Horribly. There's something I absolutely have to tell you. It's extremely important. There's no time. I have to inform you of this thing. It's super important. Oh god. Oh, I've only got seconds left. Before I can't talk to you anymore. So I have to inform you. You've seen this before. You've seen this before. It has happened many times in fiction. It is actually an example of bad writing. It's usually referred to as can't spit it out. Is the specific type of bad writing that is. And that's exactly what Luna does. I was just watching there like, God, the changelings are back is 4 words. For God's sakes. Yeah, Earthbound does make fun of it. You're right. There's a scene where he goes like, I'm about to die, but if you want me to repeat my message, I could totally repeat it. Anyways, it's the only reason that's in there. And so it's just okay. Oh yeah, Everdread does it too. That's right, they do it twice. I was thinking of Buzz Buzz at the beginning. Anyway, so she can't spit it out. And she can barely reach out to her dream, and the changelings can barely drag her in. Okay. And yeah, the problem is they needed some way for Trixie to be aware of the fact that changelings came back. The catch here is there's so many better ways to do that. First of all, Starlight's not an idiot. Right? Second of all, you just have her figure it out. It's not that hard. Instead of the dream sequence, have a bit where she kind of is like, tosses fitfully in bed. Can't get back to sleep. And is like, I'm going to go talk to Spike. I'm going to see if he's doing all right. He seemed out of sorts. Walk, walk, walk. Huh? What's that? And she just sees a changeling. She's like... And then she walks down to the next room, and there's a few more changelings. Who walks down to the third room, rule of 3, more changelings. That's when she rushes out to Starlight. It would take up the same relative amount of screen time, so the episode doesn't have to be longer or shorter, and she just figures it out herself without any need for A, making stuff up, and B, can't spit it out. There's just... And that's just an idea I literally just came up with right now off the top of my head. There are plenty of ways they could have done that better. Anyways, so whatever. We have some bad writing. Then she goes to interact with Trixie, who is awesome, as usual, and apparently would love to perform for Princess Celestia, because of course she would. I love how Trixie just constantly is freaking out over the changelings, by the way. Of course she is. Changelings are a pretty high-tier threat. We've seen this before. Trixie is incredibly low-tier. And she does know that. This is why Trixie is not a Krennic, by the way. Because she knows she's a little fish. See you around, Mr. Red. I mean, she talks big, but the moment things get real, all of that goes away. Like, oh god. Oh god, and that's awesome. So, she's freaking out. It's like, okay, we gotta go check this out. More, yeah, I'm just a performer. There's some more good writing, too. Starlight immediately thinks to check, are you really Trixie? Trixie proves that she's her. This is another thing that's always irritated me just a little bit about changelings and, shapeshifters in fiction. There are so many ways to prove that someone is who they say they are. Now, granted, I can't use immediate examples, but, like, my friend Gary and I, if there was ever any uncertainty for whatever weird reason that was actually him, it is so easy to prove that that's actually him. Because we know each other, and we've known each other for 22 years. But you get my point, right? I did too, Lord Harriman. Yeah, it's X-Men 1. That's a good example, Vigilant. X-Men 1. How do I know you're you? You're a dick. Okay. Checks out. I bring that up, though, because... So you're probably wondering why Gary and I have that set up. This is something that I recommend legitimately to other people. On the off chance that you ever get a text or an email, something that is, in other words, not their voice from someone you know, that's a little suspect, it's good to have some kind of basically pre-designed method of this is me built into it. Because Ignoring the obvious, more large-scale problems of identity theft, a very common problem is virus bots and scam bots will try to, do a copy-paste message and replace a few words around and fit. I can't remember the term, but they'll piggyback onto someone else's email or someone else's phone. So having a pre-built method to be like, hey, blank, it's basically a what do you call that military? A challenge, right? And if I say, Bob, you say Dylan, right? There's a term for that. I can't think of what that's called either. I can't think of anything today. Forgive me. But I do actually legitimately recommend that you do that, especially for anybody in your family who is older. Because they love to go after older people's accounts for those kind of things. Mom and I have one too, consequently. As does my grandmother and I. No, it's not word association. It's like you do a challenge and they have to do a response. Yeah, challenge response. It's a form of authenticating. If you hear blank, I think they do this in episode 2. Now that I'm saying that, if you hear clumsy, you have to say Draconiquus. It's that thing right there. That's the challenge response thing. Anyways, so she verifies that Trixie is Trixie, and then they go and they freak out. As Lord Harrowmont pointed out, Trixie freaks out. Oh god, we need Twilight to actually fix this. Once again, we see the Season of Outcasts thing kind of coming in here. This leads to another example of bad writing. I'm telling you, this episode just yo-yos all over the place. Because they then get together in the middle of the night in order to send a message to Chrysalis to report in. Okay. But if you pay attention to the actual dialogue, the only reason this scene happens is for exposition. Now, there are worse forms of exposition, but this is bad exposition. This is the villains explaining their plan to each other so that the heroes who happen to be present can listen in on it. And that's all that happens. Like, she says report, and then they say, yep, done. And that's all the information that is conveyed. And then she says, yes, and then I will monologue a bit about the rest of our plans. Anyways, this then leads to Starlight's invisibility spell, Trixie freaking out. Again. This also then leads to Thorax showing up. Now this is a hell of a coincidence that Thorax managed to find her camp out in the middle of nowhere. I'm willing to let go of that because this is another example of good writing. Not the fact that he could find her, but specifically pushing Thorax onto this part in the board. This is brilliant writing, actually. A, we already talked about Starlight and Thorax back during Thorax's episode, and I mentioned how that was going to come up. B, of all the people that are... Thorax is a perfectly shaped piece to fit into this puzzle. He is a former changeling who is reforming, who has pre-existing contact with Starlight, so he can prove that he is who he says he is, who is someone who is kind of an outcast who fits the overall theme. He is beautifully designed to fit this situation. And his wings look different. That's kind of strange. Anyways, so he has to prove that he's himself. Okay, I don't need the whole speech. And the whole time, I have to gush about Trixie, who is absolutely flipping out in the silence bubble. Just like, actually trying to move back against the edges of the bubble as she's freaking out there. In total silence. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. This also leads to what I call the spider analogy. If Starlight says you're on our side, I believe her, but just stay over there for now, okay? If I had to interact with like a human-sized spider who was cool and was helpful and was a friend, that's probably exactly how I would be. Okay, I get that you're on our side and I'm not going to freak out, but please just be over there. just thank you. You got it, Lola Bloss. Like the one in the... Yes! Loner, that's actually a good example. Ugh. Because he was legit. He gives you one of the best cloaks in the game. Dawn of War 2. You got it. So... Now we have the thematic parallel showing up. Starlight, tell us what to do. Both Thorax and Trixie have no idea what to do. And again, that makes sense. Trixie is a small fish and knows it, and Thorax is new to all of this. He just left the hive like a couple months ago, right? So neither of them have any experience in managing, organizing, or leading. And so both of them naturally turn to the other person present. And we've already talked about how being in charge is a problem for Starlight. And so she starts to have a little bit of emotional wigging out as the two start to hoist responsibility onto her, and that is when Discord shows up. Now, I wanted to talk about this. Obviously, he is another perfect fit for this, for reasons we'll go into in a minute. Ignoring the fact that it's Discord and he's awesome. First of all, for those of you not aware, all 0 of you, John Delancey voices Discord. What some of you may not be aware is they do some voice editing to his voice acting for Discord to adjust it a little bit. The biggest thing that they do that I'm aware of is they pitch it up a little bit so that his voice is a little bit higher as he's talking. It's just a little bit to make it so that's because if for those of you who've heard John Delancey's voice, it is actually quite deep. It's deeper than my voice is. He has a very gravelly voice by default. Now, I don't have to prove this. I can literally prove this by pointing to StarCraft 2, StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void. If you've never played it, do me a favor at some point, maybe even right now, go to YouTube and just type in StarCraft 2 Alarak, A-L-A-R-A-K. Now, that is a Protoss character that is voiced by John Delancey. Now, yes, there's some modulation on that because it's a Protoss, so there's like the echo effect, but that is John Delancey's natural voice, other than the echo. It is much deeper and much more, it's got the kind of gravelly bit to it. Now, the reason I'm bringing all of that up is they did something kind of brilliant here. For 2 lines, they didn't pitch his voice up. For exactly 2 lines, they took Fluttershy and Where. That's just John Delancey's natural voice, and you can tell because it's just so much, right? I don't know how else to describe it. You heard it if you watched the episode just now, and it's a great way to emphasize. That's a great trick with regards to the voice directing on that. It's brilliant stuff. I wanted to comment on it. Side note, by the way. Alarak was before this. StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void came out in 2015. This episode came out in 2016. Just to give you a direct parallel there. So anyways, yeah, they've sufficiently pissed Discord off because Discord is friends with Fluttershy and is slowly becoming friends with the others. And so I love it. His first reaction is, well, let's just go to Fluttershy right now. Because of course it is. Cut right to the end of the problem. We'll actually talk more about Discord next episode. Because this episode ends on what do we do, Starlight? Cut to black. And I want to talk... Yeah, Discord is one of the highest tier things we've interacted with. It's another thing. Again, we'll talk more about that next episode because it's going to come out next episode. But I wanted to mention that this is it's another bit of brilliant construction in pushing these characters together. But you'll notice how they go out of their way to make this a very character-centric piece. This episode is all about Starlight, about her emotional turmoil, and about her dealing with it. Now, yes, there's a big heroic adventure to go defeat the big bad guys, but if we're being honest, that's secondary. And I think that's the strength of the episode. If I could parallel this to Star Trek, yet again, I would mention The Best of Both Worlds Part 1. Now, if I mentioned The Best of Both Worlds Part 1 to you, what you're probably thinking of is the soundtrack, the Borg, the stakes, Wolf 359, and that's understandable. But if you've ever seen that episode recently, and if you actually go through it, you'll notice that that is the secondary plot. The primary focus of Best of Both Worlds 1 is actually about Riker. Sorry, Ross. Best of Both Worlds Part 1 is all about Riker. It is his character story, completely. To a T. It is all about his uncertainty with command, and whether or not he's going to deal with this, and you get the idea. It is entirely a character-centric piece. Arguably, Best of Both Worlds Part 2 does this as well, but you get my point. And that's the strength of it. It is the glue, the pillar, if you will, that actually the rest of the episode rotates around. And quite frankly, I've always said that something that really... Oh yeah, family is all about Picard. Absolutely. The really best of fiction is when they have a core central pillar of character, which the other events rotate around. And you can have other events. You can have big dramatic stuff and end bosses and the death of the universe and whatever else. But as long as that central pillar of character is there, that's what really gives it that lasting strength and oomph to turn it from something great into something amazing. And this is one of the reasons why I consider this particular two-parter so high tier, despite the bad writing, is because of that character-centric focus. Now, I've probably talked too much about this. God, this has been a 45-minute episode. We still need to cover part 2. So, we need to now get into part 2. So I will be back in about 25 minutes.